Welcome to the show. I'm Maggie.
I'm Mike.
And this is Friends on Fire.
And we are on a mission to get friends to talk about money. Since we're still under shelter-in-place orders, it's important that we maintain some contact with the outside world. And one of the great parts about doing this podcast is that we get to connect with other people in the FIRE community and hear their stories. So we're going to have one of those interviews for you today.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We have Chris from Inspire to Fire joining us. And first, we just wanted to say thank you and welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, Mike and Maggie. Thank you guys for having me.
Cool. So we would love you to just kind of get us started and tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris.
So yeah, a little bit about myself. I am a pharmacist, and I've been on the FIRE path for about 3 years now. It kind of all started for me when I got out of pharmacy school, and I just realized how much student debt I had. And I hadn't really thought about that previously. I just knew I wanted to be a pharmacist. But when I got out, I knew I kind of had to do something about it. And, we don't really learn about that in school. So I just went to the library and basically delved into everything I could about personal finance. I, came across Dave Ramsey as well as the Bogleheads investing books. And that kind of got me started watching CNBC, learning different terms. And I kind of just realized I was very passionate about personal finance at that point and realized maybe I got into the wrong career path. But it was too late at that point. So I said, all right, what am I going to do? And just kept going at that point. So then I kind of came across the Mad Fientist, and that podcast kind of was a game changer for me. That's when I realized, there was something more. You could actually retire early. That concept just never crossed my mind. So binged on those podcasts and, of course, found Mr. Money Mustache after that, J.L. Collins, and just kept going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. So, and that's how I've started to implement all those things into my lifestyle little by little.
And so you've listed off a number like the very famous financial independence gurus that are online. Why did you decide to start your own blog? What was your inspiration for that?
So I realized that I wanted to help people as well, and I just can't get enough of talking about financial independence. That's why I love your guys' show, because you're kind of inspiring people to talk about money and personal finance. Which I think is important. I have some friends that I kind of talk about personal finance as well. And I realize when you can talk about money with your friends and it's not, there's not a stigma attached to it, you actually build a better friendship, and you're able to kind of go back and forth and have like meaningful conversations, ones that improve their finances, or they'll give you a tip that you didn't realize. And it just helps people get ahead instead of kind of having to focus conversations on other things that might not necessarily benefit, your friendship. So I kind of wanted to do my part in that sense too.
Chris, I love that. You so well portrayed kind of the reason we're doing this, and we couldn't have said it better ourselves, of just the value that we found through having conversations about money, and even just the quality of a friendship and openness you're able to kind of build with somebody. And I like how you said it helps people get ahead versus a lot of the things you talk about with your friends might be, a little bit more on the surface at times and less valuable to both parties. So it's great. So what can you tell us? Just kind of tell us a little bit about just how old are you? What part of the country do you live in, et cetera?
Yeah. So right now I'm 31 and I live in Florida. So my wife and I, we met in Philadelphia, and going to school there. She's originally from New York, and we kind of weighed out our options in deciding where we were going to live, and Florida won just because of the cost of living and the weather and things like that. But I'm originally from Florida.
Oh, okay.
Growing up, my mom was a single mother, and so she raised me, and she was working 2 to 3 jobs at the time, and she was also going to school, doing those 2 to 3 jobs. So I kind of saw that, and from an early age, just realized how hard it can be, how hard life can be. And we didn't have a lot, but we were very humble, I guess you could say. So I kind of learned and became prideful to kind of do the best you can with what you have. So once I kind of transitioning, I didn't realize this, but throughout my life, I kind of had that frugality mindset. It was just in the back of my mind. So now over time, as I've been kind of making more money and getting myself in a better position in life, I also have that realization of how far I've come, or we've come as a family, which has helped just appreciate everything a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's great. We've actually talked before, and thank you for sharing that. We've actually talked before about just the interesting kind of correlation between how you are raised and what it kind of teaches you about money. And it actually it's interesting to hear you talk about it from the perspective of when you were a kid, Chris, because we often talk about it with how we raise our kids. And I sometimes joke, like, I want my kids to think we don't have too much money, because I think it instills a different level of just character and financial acumen skills and other things, and kids just kind of understanding. And like you mentioned, humility. And again, not that you can't have that when you have a lot of money, but I do think, there's a lot from how you were raised that really does influence how you are as an adult with money in good and bad ways.
Right. I think it's surprising how much sticks with you, and you don't realize it until maybe when you get older or when the kids get older, and you're like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And maybe some of that had to do with the upbringing.
Chris, going to the topic of your blog, what does FIRE mean to you?
So, yeah, that's a great question. FIRE, to me, I know a lot of people get hung up. Well, FIRE, financial independence, retire early. I know a lot of people get hung up on the retire early part. And I'm the same way. I don't really want to retire early. I've always been motivated and ambitious. So I know that whenever I hit that financial independence number and date, I'm not going to necessarily stop working. But what it means to me is just having options and that flexibility to do whatever I want and just enjoy a carefree life. And one thing that my wife and I really would like to do in the future is be able to travel back and forth a little bit more from New York to Florida and so on, because she's got a lot of family in New York, and that's of course very important to her. So the best of both worlds would ideally be spending some time here in Florida with my family, as well as being able to spend several months up there in New York with her family. That got my wife on board, and nothing else really broke through. And what I learned is I wasn't necessarily trying to, sell it to her. I was just caught up in the whole FIRE movement myself, and she was starting to notice that. So I didn't want to push it onto her, but I knew over time, hopefully she would come around. And that was what really changed her mind about the whole and got her on board the whole financial independence movement. Was she realized, wow, we could do a lifestyle which she hadn't even thought of.
Yeah.
And that was a moment for her.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how you were talking about just the idea of kind of options and flexibility, and that the retire early part isn't necessarily the priority. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to quit working and you might just do something else. You might have a lot more flexibility and options, as you said. And I think we have a very similar point of view on, we're more focused on the financial independence piece than we are on the retire early piece of it.
FIRE has that catchy acronym. So yeah. I'm not sure we could come up with a different one, but yeah.
Well, there's the guys that just focus on the FI part, but yeah, I agree. FIRE. It doesn't rhyme with inspire too. So, right. You needed the whole word FIRE.
Yeah.
It'd be inspire to FI.
There you go. I'm going to have to rebrand.
Yeah, you can take that. You're welcome. Chris, I'm curious to hear just a little bit more around like how long, when you were talking about your wife and, you know, her getting on board. I love your approach of, you know, not pushing it and just kind of, you know, getting into it yourself and her seeing the sort of side effects of that. What was the time period between when you kind of got into this and when she got on board? Like, how long was that?
I really wanted it to work because I realized that this was pretty important. If we were, you know, we're married, so if I was going to pursue fire, I was kind of really going to have to depend on her a lot too. Luckily, she's not a very high maintenance person to begin with. She's also had kind of a humble beginning herself. So we were on the same page in terms of money before. And then when I took it to that next level of financial independence, she, you know, at first it was not an easy concept for her to understand. She's very about living in the now, which is great. It balances me out as well. I'm thinking about 30 years in the future, while she's thinking about the next 3 months, which is fine. And but it did take her a little bit of time, and slowly she started to realize that building a better future with the flexibility would be amazing. So we slowly kind of ramped up her 401k. Again, it's just when you get used to something, a certain amount in your paycheck, it's very difficult. That lifestyle creep, you know, kicked in, and even a 5% or 4% increase in her 401k contribution was a lot. But we did it little by little, and right now she's maxing out her 401k just like I am, and she's a full head of steam just like me.
That's great. So one of the things that I really like about your blog is the detail of your financial analysis and the way that you lay out a lot of the decision-making process and the financial impacts of that. So this isn't your educational or your professional background. Like, how did you pick up those skills, and was that helpful in discussing this and selling your wife on the idea?
So it was very helpful. I like to write my articles as if I'm writing for someone like my wife or someone who isn't necessarily obsessed with the financial independence movement like myself. So I try to write them in a way that hopefully it'll be easy to understand and to actually apply. And that's why I want to go into detail, really answering the question that you came for, or maybe you didn't even know you had, and then answering that next question that you probably will have. That way you can kind of move forward in an order that makes sense and then actually apply it. Because you're like, wow, this is actually not that hard. A lot of people get put off by money or personal finances because they think that's not my field. I need a professional. You know, you really don't. For a lot of things, you just need to do your research. The information is out there. And if it's easy to digest, you can apply it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I totally agree. And that's one of the things that we really try to focus on with this show is that a lot of these concepts might seem difficult, but with just a little bit of background knowledge, you can make great decisions.
I'm curious if you've heard the terms lean fire versus fat fire. I just recently heard about them, and I'm just kind of curious on like your thoughts and how much you kind of like, do you have different levels of goals, and just kind of how you think about what your goals are tied to the financial independence part of things?
Yeah, so I love that concept of being able to choose lean fire, fat fire. I also heard recently coast fire and barista fire, which is something I didn't even know.
Is that where you become?
That.
Is that where you go get a job at Starbucks? Barista fire?
Yeah, the barista fire is getting a job at Starbucks. I think because they give part-timers
insurance,
health insurance.
Yeah, that's funny.
That was pretty interesting. And the coast fire is when you save up enough money in your 401k or your retirement accounts, and then you just, you get it to a certain amount where you can just let it run its course until you're 60, and it'll be enough for you, and you just have to worry about the interim. So that was another concept. So that part I really like. Me, personally, I think I'm just aiming for regular fire at this point. And my wife is big on fat fire because she just thinks like, best of all worlds, right? I don't have to go to work and I could just spend a little bit more. So that's her goal, and we'll just play it. We'll see how it goes, and that's what I like is we can kind of adjust and see what we want to do and what's important to us. Life changes and it kind of makes you adapt. So that's what we'll do. We'll adapt, and if we need to save a little bit more or work a little bit longer, that's fine, because really the end goal is if we retire by, I think we're projected to retire around 37. That's in about 6 years if we wanted to. And that's right there. Amazing. So even if we have to work, yeah. And that's the great part is even if we have to work a little bit longer, we'll retire at 40. That's still super early. And that's what I kind of like. It's just not being in such a rush.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I should clarify too for people, the idea of kind of lean fire, fat fire, and then I'll mention the other ones Chris said is many people always had this sort of one number in their head for fire, which we've talked about before was 25 times your annual estimated spending level. But there's a lot of people coming out with these concepts of maybe there's a leaner number you could get to and still feel good enough to switch jobs, quit your job, pursue other goals, whatever you might want to do. Versus also there's a fat fire, which is a more conservative approach, which is I want to have even more than 25 times my annual spending. And I like your point, Chris, of kind of why your wife likes fat fire, because she wants to feel like she could spend a little more and not be on, such a budget. I also like the idea personally of fat fire because I'm just kind of fearful that something unexpected will come up, the cost of medical insurance, whatever it might be, or an emergency or something. And so I like the idea of like more than I think I need, but also if something doesn't come up, then I can live a little, more luxuriously at times, take some cooler vacations and other things. And then I love barista fire because I've often thought like worst case, I could go get a job at Trader Joe's or Starbucks and, do something to get some insurance and make a little extra money. Is there anything that you would have done differently in the past 2.5 to 3 years since you've started your fire journey that you would kind of give to others in terms of advice?
So the important part, I think, to getting started is just implementing all these ideas, like maxing out your 401k or not even maxing out, just increasing or contributing. And I've got an article set up to kind of just give you an idea of what you might want to invest in, the investment order that you might want to take advantage of to optimize, your tax advantage accounts. I think just getting started and implementing it little by little is super important. And then once that's done, I think the hard part is patience. I think that's something that I struggled with, which was the first year or two, I was looking for that next life hack or that next optimization that would save me. And I did a lot of that. I refinanced my student loans. I was actually able, right now I currently pay 1.7% on my student loans, which I'm like, I can't believe it. But that was just one of the many type of steps that I took to just look to optimize my life, trim the fat from my expenses. But once you get to a certain point, there's not much more you can do other than just keep it going and be patient. So I would say focus on that at the beginning, but don't let that consume you because it's a long journey at times. And, the fire movement is amazing, but it's also a journey and you have to kind of enjoy the whole process. And that's one thing that the first year or two I wasn't really enjoying. I was just really consumed with trying to, get there faster. And now I'm realizing I'm in a good place. I just need to be patient at this point.
That is such an amazing point, Chris, because I would imagine all of us, just based on the conversation we've had so far, we're driven, focused people. And I do think you can take some of these kind of practices and approaches to extremes and have to be careful. And I find myself even doing it where I sometimes am getting like, really tight about something. And I'm like, we have the money. I don't know why I'm being so difficult about this particular thing. And just remembering that, yeah, it is a journey. Enjoy the ride and don't get, too overly tough on yourself about certain things. Or I love the idea of patience and just, recognizing you're not going to get there in 1 month.
Like a good example of this is I took it to the point where I was just trying to cut my electricity bill, cut my water bill, cut my home insurance premium. I was doing a lot. And I was reading a lot, and basically I had come across military showers to save on electricity and water. And
is that cold showers is that cold showers or short showers or both?
So it's both, or I believe it's both, but I definitely was just going at it from the short shower perspective of just cutting off the water and lathering up and then going ahead and cutting it back on and then cutting it back off. And I realized it when I was like, what am I doing? I can definitely afford to run this water if I wanted to, just a little bit longer. I'm not wasting it, but I don't need military showers in my life. And it was a low point, a little bit of a low point where I realized, okay, I need to reflect and take it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I love that story. It's a great example.
All right, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been really exciting for us to talk to you and hear your perspective. I think we share a lot, and it's also bringing some new thoughts to us. So how can people listening today find you online, and what can they expect to gain from your blog?
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And anybody can find me at my blog, inspiredtofire.com. I'm also on Instagram, same title, Inspired to Fire. And you can find a lot of different things there on my site. I have a financial independence spreadsheet that will help you to kind of project your financial independence number and date, as well as it gives you a breakdown of how much money you can expect to have in each sort of retirement account or bucket. And I think that's super important because when we reach our FIRE or our financial independence number, a lot of times that will be in different retirement accounts, and you have to kind of manage which ones you can take out from first. I also have a Roth conversion ladder to help people get started on that. I think that's a super helpful tool to start with, converting some money from your 401k into a Roth and get that accessible as well.
Well, thanks, Chris. We really appreciate you coming on and wish you the best of luck with your blog and your financial independence journey.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thank you.